So thank you for having me. There's so much orange everywhere. It's like the Nectarine Conference. Thank you for having me. My name is Tendayi. I'm going to apologize up front. I have a throat infection. So I'm performing, and the instrument with which I perform is the one that's sick. And so I'm not going to be shouting, and every now and again I might take a sip of my tea, so I apologize for that up front. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be sharing with you some of the lessons that I'm learning from trying to work with large companies that are managed using linear processes and trying to teach them and work with them to adopt nonlinear practices. So that's almost like half the conversation. The other half of the conversation that I would like to have with you today is about how even us as practitioners of Lean and Agile, when we start creating our own processes, we try and take a nonlinear process and try and make it linear, because we're working in linear companies, right? So, I mean, it's a lot of pressure that we're under, because of course we need to be able to report up to management about what we're doing, and we need to explain our process, and we need to show people exactly how it works. So we end up saying things that don't really make sense and are kind of like violations of the principles which we're supposed to practice. And I'll show you exactly what I mean in a few minutes. But just to set context, right, a lot of large companies and a lot of medium-sized companies are asking me to come and help them innovate. And the hardest thing to do is try and innovate in a large organization, because actually, inside large organizations, there's a lot of complacency that comes with being successful. You know, when people tell you you must plant your seeds while the sun is shining, or some sort of like make hay while the sun is shining, the reason why they say that, or the reason why they give people that advice, is because that's actually the hardest thing to do. Because when the sun is shining, there's a guy on stage saying, "Get your wristband and go to the beach." So that's really what people want to do. Nobody wants to be in the garden planting seeds, right? And so that's it's a really hard discipline for large companies to have. Do any of you know the year in which Nokia had its highest level of profit? Just shout a number. 2007, there you go. The winner is over here somewhere. Give that guy 2 wristbands. 2 free drinks at the beach, right? So in 2007, as you can tell up there, Nokia had its highest level of profitability. Now, what happened in 2007 was that the first iPhone launched. So if you're looking at your annual report and it says you made $7 billion in profit, and there's a phone somewhere from a computer company that's only got 1 million people who have bought it, you're like, why are we talking about this? Like, if we had this phone in our portfolio and we only added 1 million people, it wouldn't even register as a thing on our growth. And that's the complacency that happens, which is the thing that disrupts you happens when you're comfortable. Right? It doesn't happen when you're uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, you're able to react. So companies that get disrupted while they're comfortable. And one of the reasons why this happens is because when companies actually find something that works, something that's really successful, they build a business model around it. So they organize the whole company around this one thing that they've made that's successful. So everything about the company is now about delivering this one thing. The HR processes, the incentives, the technology stack, everything is just about delivering this one business model. And that's a challenge because every single business model has a life cycle. There's not a single business model or product on the planet that doesn't have a life cycle. And even if the life cycle is 100 years, it has a life cycle. And what we know is that life cycles are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So if your business model or product or service has a life cycle, and you organize your company around that business model or product, what you've effectively done is you've made the life cycle of your business model and the life cycle of your company the same thing. You've basically shackled your company to the life cycle of your business model and product. And this is a problem. And so with the conversation we're trying to have with leaders is, your job in the 21st century is to uncouple the life cycle of your company to the life cycle of your business models and products. You cannot make these things the same things. What you need to do instead is think of your company as a long-lasting institution that can last forever and ever and ever, and underneath the company are all these business models and products and services that just rise and fall and rise and fall and rise and fall. And what that does is it forces leaders to not think about strategy as like a linear process where you protect the company from competitors, you do an annual budget, and then you put something on a roadmap, and then you execute against the roadmap. All of these linear practices that large organizations have that are not really helpful in an environment where you need to do that stuff, where things rise and fall, things rise and fall, things rise and fall, right? And that creates another challenge, which is, if you're going to build a portfolio of business models, how do you even do it? And what leaders are trying to do, using, again, the same linear processes, is they're trying to pick the winner on day one. Every company is looking for that one big idea. You walk into companies and they're going, when is our next billion-dollar opportunity? Like as if that's how billion-dollar opportunities are found. Like you go, when is our next, oh, let's go get our next billion-dollar, there it is over there. Let's go get our next billion-dollar opportunity. That's not how billion-dollar opportunities are found. Billion-dollar opportunities emerge, right? So what companies need to be doing is just working on a bunch of stuff. What they need to do is create the context in which billion-dollar ideas emerge. You can't actually pick the winner on day one. Now, this doesn't stop them from trying. I mean, I was once in Mexico coaching a large organization, and so I'm coaching the team on how to do lean startup and agile and all these cool practices, and then I'm coaching the leaders on how you lead those teams by asking the right questions at the right time, and then we say, right, let's actually make a decision together. So we get them together, and the team starts presenting the presentation that they know their leaders like, not the presentation that I had done with them, but the one they know their leaders like, the one where costs are declining and profits are going up, right? And so they do that presentation, and at the end of the presentation, nobody says anything until the finance director says to the team, I can't invest in this thing. And then everybody's like silent for a couple of seconds, and then he goes, because it doesn't meet our financial hurdle rate. So I'm just like, oh, what a nightmare. But then he says something worse. He says to the team, go work on your business plan, and then come back when your plan meets the financial hurdle rate. And I was just like, that's absurd. Like, a business plan can't meet a financial hurdle rate. A business plan is not the same thing as an actual thing in the market that is meeting the financial hurdle rate. And so you can see people are making decisions using linear processes. What they're trying to do is say, I won't give you money until you promise me that you can give me money back in year 5. Right? But there's no way of knowing this up front. Now, that's really interesting, right? And we can make fun of large companies, and we can show them this image here that innovation is nonlinear. It's a bit of a squiggle, and then it straightens out. And then I met some geek at some other conference who told me that if you double-click on the straight line, it looks exactly like that. That's too much for me, but okay. I couldn't argue with that. I haven't double-clicked it myself yet. And so, but the point is that they're trying to apply a linear process, a linear management process where you put something inside and then something comes out on the other end, when actually it's more like chaos. And so we know this about large companies. And I like to always give this speech by starting by telling this story about large companies. But actually, we are just as bad. The lean startup practitioners, myself, everybody in this room, we're just as bad. And here's how we are bad. Just watch this, right? So here's a really cool lean startup guy, the Agile guy. And then he's asked by the leadership, oh, you want to set up an innovation lab? And they go, yeah, because, you know, Facebook and Google and guess what happened to BlackBerry and all this stuff? And the leader's like, oh, great. You can have your innovation lab. You go do some innovation cool stuff. But what's going to happen there? And this is what your lean startup guy will say. The lean startup guy will say, beep, beep. I think ringtones are very revealing. So the lean startup guy will say, here's what's going to happen in the lab. We're going to first focus on problem-solution fit. And then, after we're done with problem-solution fit, we'll do product-market fit. And then after we're done with product-market fit, we'll do business model fit. And then after we're done with business model fit, we'll scale. You might as well tell the guy, here's your 5-year projection. Because this is not how entrepreneurship works. This is not how innovation works. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take that squiggle and we're trying to make it a linear thing so we can explain it to managers. But the worst thing about it is that not only do we want to explain it to managers, we believe this. We actually believe that this is the process that innovation follows. And this is absurd. And I'll show you why. Just sort of roll with me. Don't start throwing tomatoes yet. I call this the brutality of the lean startup coach. And this is what happens with the lean startup coach or the agile coach when they meet an innovation team for the first time. They come to the team and they go, show me what you're working on. And then the team says, yeah, this is what we're working on. And then they go, okay, I know what you need to do. It always says, you might as well hire McKinsey. You know how McKinsey always tells you the same thing that you need to do? When you hire a lean startup coach, they'll tell you exactly the same thing. You need to go talk to your customers and find out what their need is. And the team is like, wait, no, listen, like, we've got this data that shows we've got... No. You don't understand. Have you read The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick? You need to talk to customers. Get out of the building. Go talk to your customers. Because first, you need to show problem. You need to study the problem. You need problem-solution fit. So the team's like, okay, let's go do the thing again. And then another lean startup coach comes and goes, no, you don't need to do that. What you need to do is to map your business model and identify your riskiest assumption. So the team is like, okay, we're going to identify our riskiest assumption. So what if our riskiest assumption is whether or not we have the capability to build the solution? And then the other coach goes, no, it doesn't matter. Like, capability to build a solution is not really a risk. The risk is you're making stuff people want. So you need to go do problem-solution fit. What if the risky assumption is, will the key partners work with us? Like, that's the risk. Like, it doesn't matter if people want it. It doesn't matter if you can make it. But if you can't have a key partner deliver that for you, if you're working on electric cars and you don't have any key partners that will help you build charge stations, like, isn't that like a risky assumption that needs to be validated using the lean startup process? No. Go talk to customers to find out if they want electric cars first. Then you can work on the charge station thing. Okay? And then this whole idea that you go one sticky note at a time, like you go problem, then you go customer segment. I have never met an entrepreneur who does this. In my whole life, I've never met an entrepreneur who goes one sticky note at a time. Who tells you that you can't test multiple assumptions at the same time? Like, why are we telling people these things? We understand that for innovation to be successful, you need to solve the business model question. You need to find a business model that works. But who says that the process of finding a business model that works is linear? And we are the ones who are doing this. There's no manager there. There's no MBA there. It's only us. All right? And that's really a problem that becomes a real challenge when you're trying to actually do this work. And I myself was a victim of this. So I was working at Pearson. My latest book, The Lean Product Lifecycle, is based on the process that we designed there. And what we were trying to do was design a framework for managing a portfolio that covered both searching for new ideas and testing new ideas and also trying to scale those ideas. So we built what we call the Lean Product Lifecycle. You go from idea, then you explore the idea, then you validate the idea, and then you start scaling the idea. But in our minds, we kept getting asked this question by the teams, which is, so do you always start at idea? And then we say, no. Well, this is a sentence that I formulated myself. I was like, no, we show you this framework for storytelling purposes only. You can start anywhere. And then everyone's like, what? Like, that's really confusing. And then we're like, no, wait. We have a different graphic. Let me show you this picture. Right? We designed this at Pearson. We were showing this to people. And it was like, so this shows you that, you can start anywhere, you can go back, you can... And what we effectively try to do is put a linear thing and then add this to it. That's what we're trying to do, right? Because I've never met two teams that are exactly the same. Like, one team understands the customer need, but they don't really have an idea of how to solve it. And I've also met a team with a really great technology, but they don't have the right business model for it. I've met a startup team that's making loads of money. They're struggling with scaling, but they don't know why because they haven't had a conversation with customers. So this idea that you can start anywhere makes sense, except that we're telling people that no. First, you have to go talk to the customer. Right? And this is absurd. Here's another one. This is the design thinking thing. And again, you can see all the lines going over here, then another one going there. It's like, okay, that's good. And what they're really trying to express is this. Right? It's this whole idea that it's a nonlinear process. You just sort of pick it up from where it is, and then you start figuring out. You don't actually sort of know exactly what's going to happen. And then here's my favorite one. Say no more. The absurdity of this is this. In this Gartner thing, they're trying to say that there's one part of the process where you do design thinking. And then there's another part of the process where you do lean startup. And then there's another part of the process where you do agile. That's absurd. Like, it's beyond absurd. Okay, so tell me something, right? If you empathize with a customer and you define and you ideate, does that mean that when you're doing agile, you don't empathize? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's absurd, right? But somehow, because we're in companies where there's management processes and funnels and budgets, the company is like a drunk uncle that you can't not invite to the wedding, but if you invite them to the wedding, they're going to ruin the wedding. And so you really don't know what to do, so you draw this graphic for them. And you say, first we're going to do design thinking, then we'll do lean startup, et cetera, and then you hire coaches and you train them to teach this stuff to people. Right? And that's just, I have no words. Then the other one is, I've actually been in like accelerator programs inside large companies that tell people from week 1 to week 4, we're going to be doing formation. And then from week 4 to week 12, we're going to be doing validation. And then from week 12 to month 6, or whatever, we're going to be doing growth. That's not how that works. Like, you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose what's happening. That's not how it works, right? But we're managing our lean startup teams, we're managing our innovation programs using these frameworks and this language. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we've made in this sort of lean startup movement is telling people that lean startup is a scientific process. We're bringing science and experimentation to the innovation process. It only works partially, that metaphor. It only works partially. Do you know why? Because when you're doing innovation and entrepreneurship, you're not searching for universal truths. You're not trying to formulate the law of gravity or the law of relativity. That's not what you're trying to do. In fact, with innovation, things that were true last year are wrong today. Right? So there is no end. There's no formula. And so the best way to formulate it that we've started sort of stumbling upon is this idea that innovation is a wicked problem. And I don't mean wicked as in like wicked. Bad meaning good. That's not what I mean. This term comes from a paper in 1973 by these two academics, Rittel and Weber, and what they were writing about was social policy and sort of social planning. And they were saying that people have been trying to approach social planning and social policy as a scientific discipline, but it's actually a wicked problem, which is you don't know that the thing you're about to do and execute on the public will work out the way you expect. There's so much unintended stuff that happens, so much unplanned stuff that happens. And so social planning is not a linear scientific problem, it's a wicked problem, which means that there's no definitive solution and there's no end point. And so when you start to break down the concept, there is no definitive formulation for a wicked problem. So, you know when you do your persona thing, that's not a definitive formulation of the customer. It just isn't. It's your best guess. When you do the story thing before you build the feature, that's not a definitive formulation of the... It's not a definitive formulation of anything. There's a guy somewhere else in this world building the same feature you're building with a different story. Right? There is no definitive formulation. What we're doing is we're satisficing. And this is a sort of social science term, which is the combination of satisfy and suffice. Academics make up words, so it's satisficing. And what we're doing is by satisficing, we're just trying to do stuff that's good enough. We're searching for sustainably profitable business models. And wicked problems have no stopping rule. It's not like a mathematical formula where you go, oh yeah, no, I've solved it, full stop. That's not how it works. And so that's the problem with people thinking, well, first you do design thinking and then you're finished because you've spoken to the customer. Now you do the sprints where you build the feature and then now you scale. That's not how it works. There's people who are trying to scale their businesses who don't know why scale is failing, and that's simply because they don't understand the customer. So there is no stopping rule. And all the stuff that's cool this year is not cool next year. So, I mean, I have actually met executives who say, no, we've done innovation, now we're just executing. And I'm like, dude, there's no stopping rule. Right? That's really, really important. And then wicked problems don't have a finite set of solutions like scientific problems do. All right? For the same job to be done, customers are buying different solutions. So how can you make this a scientific process, right? That's really the question that we're trying to grapple with. And then here's the final one. If you're working on a scientific problem, your solution is either true or false. But if you're working on a wicked problem, it's either good, like the feature works, people like it, they like the product, they like the service, but that doesn't mean that it's a truth. It's just a good thing, or it either works or it doesn't. So we're just trying to figure out and fumble around and see what works and what doesn't work. And so one way to think about it, and this is also just it's in itself a poor metaphor, but I'm going to try and use it and see if it works. One way to think about it is innovation is as if somebody gave you a bag of puzzles, like puzzle pieces, except that the puzzle can't be solved, and they haven't given you a picture to solve the puzzle with, and inside the bag there's puzzle pieces that have nothing to do with the puzzle you're trying to solve. It's like that lean startup coach that keeps telling you to put up a Facebook page. That's like a puzzle piece that has nothing to do with the problem you're trying to solve. There's just a lot of noise. And just when you think you've figured out the puzzle, something else happens that tells you haven't figured out the puzzle. So it's just a bit of a chaotic sort of situation. And that's what drives people nuts, and that's why they then try and put a linear process against it. So what is a way that we can think about this? Well, let's take that satisficing term. It's like the question I always get from people, which is, does statistical significance matter when you're doing customer research and building a business model? And I'm like, we're not trying to publish papers. You'll never find a universal truth, so who cares about statistical significance? Like, what is the job of statistical significance? Is a scientific process for determining the likelihood that something applies to everybody. That's what the social sciences use it for. Like, to what extent could you use this to predict everybody else? So it's a process for trying to define universal truth. We're not looking for statistical significance. What we're trying to do is simply find business models that work. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to find universal truths. And once you start to put that lens on it, you can start to say, okay, so we can actually satisfy. Like, what is the conversion rate that we need to make the business model profitable? And then you just start working on making that better every year, adding new stuff and testing it and seeing whether it's improving the stuff. You know how we say like 95% of startups fail? Have you ever heard that term before? So if you applied the scientific principle of statistical significance to that, it means you just better go get a job at McDonald's. That's what it actually means. And that's why it's not really relevant to apply some of these scientific principles to what we're trying to do. right? What we're really trying to do is find a business model that works. So the question for innovation is, how close are you to finding a business model that works? That's really the question. And when we're talking about finding business models that work, we can probably break that down into like 4 categories of questions. The first one being, can we do this thing? Can we create this product, right? Can we like create this product? And then the next one being, should we create this product at all? And then the next one being, can we create this whole thing and do it profitably? And then finally, if we can do it profitably, can we actually scale it? Now, I say these things, I clicked through them in a linear way for storytelling purposes only. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to follow the process. Let's start with feasibility, then let's go to desirability, then let's go to viability. That's not how it works, right? Again, you have to think about it as like solving this unsolvable puzzle, which basically means that you have to start where you are. You really have to start where you are. And so what we've been doing at Strategyzer, where I work, is we've been thinking about how you get people to benchmark where they are, because that then allows you to make decisions about how close you are to finding the business model and what you need to do next. So there's a whole bunch of questions you can ask yourselves, what assets do we actually have? What technologies have we created, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can also ask yourself another question, which is, what have we done so far to increase the likelihood of success? And then finally, what have we done so far to increase the magnitude of success? And a way to frame these questions is to frame them around those 4 characteristics that I was talking about. So if you think about it in terms of like benchmarking innovation, you can think about a scorecard that you could use to do this with your teams. Now, this scorecard it just captures all the things you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about business models, but it doesn't tell you where to sort of start, right? You sort of have to figure that out as you actually go. So if you think about desirability, and I'm going to do this because I don't know if it works. Is this a reflection of what you're looking at? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So if you think about, okay, this is not working. And it's like a really cool feature of the thing, but it's not satisfying. So if you think about desirability, it's really about whether customers care about it, whether the value proposition resonates, whether you found the right channel, whether you've got the right relationships to work with these customers. But here's one thing that I would like you to sort of focus on in terms of how you're scoring these things. You're not asking people what they think, you're asking them whether they have evidence, whether they have like learned. So it's still the same process, right? It's just that you're benchmarking where they are. And then you can do the same thing for feasibility. Do we have the right resources? Do we know exactly what we're doing? Do we have the right key partners? And you can do the same thing for viability. How much are customers willing to pay? Do we know how they'll pay? Do we know how much it'll cost us to create the product? Do we have evidence of this knowledge? Because you're just trying to build the puzzle pieces. And then you can do the same thing for adaptability, which is the market. Do we understand the industry forces? Do we understand the market forces? Do we understand key trends? Do we know we're ready? I have a friend called Adam Burke who says, what do you call a startup that's too early? You've heard this before, right? When a startup says, we had the right idea, but we were too early. Right? And Adam Burke just says, that's failure. Because you can actually really start thinking about, before you launch, whether the market is actually ready to actually, for your product to actually scale, and you can start running experiments and testing and doing research to find this out. And so you can actually solve for adaptability. It's not a mystery, right? It's not something that's actually hidden. And then if you're inside a large company, you can also maybe start thinking about strategic fit, and also start thinking about whether or not you have evidence about the size of opportunity. Now, here's how this works. This is a nonlinear process. Think about this as like a DJ with a graphic equalizer, okay? You meet the team where they are. You don't go to the team and go, you need to talk to customers. You actually meet them where they are. So every now and again, you run into a team that's got a little bit of strategic fit. They understand their customers really well, but they don't really have anything of value to give to those customers. So they don't have any viability, and they don't really understand their market, and maybe the size of the opportunity right now, from what they know, doesn't seem that big. So you've now met this team where they are. If you meet a team like this, you don't tell them, go talk to customers. Because that's not the problem they're trying to solve right now in terms of the business model. We're trying to find business models that work. We're not trying to follow a linear process. So here's one team. I've also worked with teams that have a different level, right? They have seen something happening in the world that they want to respond to. They've seen a key trend, something that's emerging. So they have a high level of evidence for their adaptability of whatever it is that they're working on, but they really haven't really spoken to customers. They don't know exactly what they're going to make, and right? And so this is a different team. You give them different coaching. And you point them in a different direction in terms of what they need to work on first. I've also worked with teams where they have a technology. You know, the inventor with the solution looking for a problem, right? This is a good place to start. You know, people are always making fun of people with ideas. Like as if like that's how ideas come to, like ideas come to people because first they empathize. That's not what happens. Most of your ideas come to you when you're in the shower. There's no empathization there, right? And most of the things happen because people are just tinkering around and they're working on interesting stuff. Like tinkering around is fine. Eventually, you have to solve for all aspects of your business model. You have to solve for customer needs, you have to solve for viability and adaptability, you have to solve for all these things, but you can't tell a team that this is dumb that they're in this position and try and make them feel bad. You coach this team using a different way of coaching, right? And then finally, here's a graphic of your startup that's making money but can't scale. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, you don't really understand trends and you don't understand your customer. So even though you're making $12 million in revenue a month, we need to do some customer development, right? Whereas we tend to feel like if a startup is making $12 million a month, they don't need to do customer development. That's only for teams that don't have revenue. So you can see, like, you can actually manage innovation using nonlinear processes if you really think about exactly what you need to manage. So you start where you are, and then after every single sprint, 2 months, 1 week, 2 weeks, or whatever, all you have to do is actually track progress. That's all you need to do, is track the progress that the teams are making towards success. And so you can do this using like a really simple sort of formulation where you have a conversation with people where you say, they tell you what they did and what they've learned, right? And the value proposition they're working on at the moment. But the really most critical innovation questions are over there, which is what we still don't know and what we plan to do next. And that's what the scorecard is for. We still don't know feasibility, we still don't know viability, we still don't know, so that's what we're going to start working on next, right? And by doing this, you start to create a dynamic process with which you can manage innovation. So ultimately, you can see where we're going with this, right? You do need to solve for problem-solution fit. You do need to solve for product-market fit. You do need to solve for business model fit, but it's not a straight line. You don't go from one to the other, right? You can do this in a non-linear fashion as long as you understand how these things are connected and how they relate to each other. So again, I'll leave you with the definition of a wicked problem, which is a problem that's really hard to specify and describe. It doesn't have a single best solution. It is complex to solve as the requirements are constantly changing. And so your job as coaches and leaders and managers and innovators is to try and solve for this as you're actually trying to do your work. Now, I think I'm on time and I'm done. I got 10 minutes. Okay, cool. So you can maybe ask questions. So you can download the scorecard. It's on the Strategyzer blog. If you take a picture of this thing here, because it doesn't, you can just go and download. It's free and see if you want to use it with your teams. Feel free to tinker with it and make it what you need within your context. It's not a religious document. It's not the tablet from the mountains. And then I have a book coming out sometime this year through Sense and Respond Press with Jeff Gottelf and them. It's called Right Question, Right Time, and that's where these concepts are actually going to be spoken about. So thank you very much for having me. It's been fun. Thank you.